Hello all, just demoing how you would go about tracking sales tax paid to vendor so that you'll be able to claim it as a credit when you file sales tax with the state. So step one is going to be when you connect to QuickBooks, you'll come in here, make sure that at the very least sync expenses and sync vendor invoices are toggled on. Ideally you would toggle everything on, but make sure that at least those two are toggled on. Then you'll come to manage settings. And this is where you're going to do your chart of accounts mapping. Down here where it says tax paid to vendor, make sure that you come in here and actually map that to an account in QuickBooks, specifically where you track sales tax paid to vendor. Now, typically you'll already have an account like this in QuickBooks. If you're somewhat new to QuickBooks, you might need your accountant or bookkeeper to create that account for you in QuickBooks. Once they've done that, come back here, refresh the page, and you should be able to select it here. Then you'll click Update Accounts, and that account mapping will be in place. Then when you go to create expenses or ultimately purchase orders and bills in Materio, that will sync over to QuickBooks correctly as sales tax paid to vendor. And I'll just give a couple of examples of that. So over here in expenses, here's an expense where I've put some tax paid to the vendor into that expense. And when that synced over to QuickBooks, that actually synced over with that specific mapping that we did in the previous step as sales tax paid to vendor on that expense. Similarly, when you have a purchase order that has tax paid to vendor on the purchase order, and once you sync that over to QuickBooks, that's also going to eventually sync over to QuickBooks with that sales tax paid to vendor mapped here on this line. That's all recorded in that account that we set up in the first step that we did. So here's your actual product and delivery on the purchase order, but here's where we're syncing over the sales tax paid to vendor so that you can track that separately in QuickBooks. All right, so that's how you would set up the vendor tax mapping in Materio, and that's how things are going to sync over when you actually input expenses and input purchase orders and bills into Materio. The last step is going into QuickBooks and running a report to see how much of that vendor tax you can actually deduct on your tax reporting to the state. Now this is an area where your accountant needs to do this, and they need to advise you on exactly what you can and cannot do. Obviously, there's certain states where you can deduct this tax on your return, other states not so much. This is not an area where Materio gives financial or tax advice. You need to check with your accountant on that. That being said, I'll just show one way that you could go about looking this information up in QuickBooks. So one way that you could go about this in QuickBooks would be to come to Reports, Standard Reports, and I'm just going to search for transaction detail by account. I'm just going to put last year as the date range. Typically, for the date range, you would put whatever your sales tax filing period is, and you'll be looking at one filing period at a time. So I'm going to put last year. I'm going to add a filter here and say the product service equals tax paid to vendor, Materio. That's what you did in that initial mapping step that I showed. It was you setting up this product service in QuickBooks where we're tracking the sales tax. And then I'm going to go ahead and group by customer. You could even do customer with sub-customers if you wanted. And this is going to show you for each individual job for this reporting period, how much in tax did you pay to the vendor, and then you'll be able to deduct that on your sales tax reporting to the state, pending what jurisdiction you're in. So the reason that I'm grouping by customer here is just in case you have customers in various different locales. For instance, some locales that might allow you to deduct that sales tax paid to vendor, other locales might not. If all your customers are in the same locales with the same rules, then you might not even really need to group by customer here. I'm just showing that as an optional step. Again, something that your bookkeeper or tax professional would be advising you on. All right, so that is how typically the sales tax paid to vendor is handled in Materio. Make sure to reach out to us with any questions that you might have.